Nope.
Thank you, everyone, for joining our first public call. This should be not too long of a session since it's close to the end of the year. We're kind of wrapping up some initiatives and making the community aware of things that are going on. And if anyone who's not part of the committee wants to join in, just raise your hand and feel free to chime in on some of these discussion topics. But with that being said, I did copy the agenda into the chat here, and we'll start with some of the old business topics. So Michael wasn't able to join, but he does have a governance policy working draft for how repo coordination might work at Intersect. And he put that on a public repository under the Intersect GitHub, and I will work to get a link on that. But we're pushing that out there to get feedback and different trains of thought associated with it. I think it's a pretty well written article altogether, but I'll 2 seconds and
can't seem to find the agenda in this chat here, so not sure.
Let
Maybe
me-
it was now I can see the link, but I think if you did join a bit later, you wouldn't see the agenda overall. Oh yeah,
There we go.
thank you.
No problem.
All right.
So that's the old business where that is. That's public. I've already pushed it via Marcom sites at Intersect to just get some traffic. The next one is the Project Incubation technical working group. We did vote to get that started, and I do have a draft here. Essentially, I think Sebastian, you brought up a good point of, is this something Intersect wants to do? And this just comes from basic ideas of how other member-based organizations are operating. And essentially, it gives incentives for projects that want to be a part of Intersect, or that Intersect does adopt, how they go through maturity cycles. And there's different service offerings at those levels that Intersect can offer to them. It's basically to help get sandbox projects or brand new ideas off the ground and get some support around them, as well as media awareness, and build up that collectively until they become a self-sufficient project, and Intersect's just kind of a back support at that point, rather than being a main stakeholder to keep it.
Yeah, I think it's a very familiar concept, right? So you have different levels of maturity. But yeah, I think it's already pointed out here that is kind of it's a cross-cutting program, right? It's kind of a thing which everybody needs to be aware of, and it goes in all directions. Like, is it about technical steering, right? Where early projects, early incubating ones will be much less involved in being steered, much more prototypical and I guess researchy maybe. And maybe they have also less policies to follow, right? Less maybe required publicity or public meetings, or like maybe these committees we suggest in a governance, in the open source governance, right? Maybe the committees are a bit more toned down, right? Whereas if it's becoming more mature, you must have a bit more of these convinced policies fulfilled and so on, right?
Yeah, which I was actually rereading how the Cloud Native Computing Foundation does it. And they basically also leave it to the projects themselves to determine when they want to go up that ladder. And one of the critical things they judge too is adopting that the CNCF's code of conduct, having so much follower traction or contribution traction, and then having certain contributor friendly like documentation and stuff like that. So it's and kind of some adherence to the the member-based organization's policies, but then also just the general health of the project. And I guess where we
will
definitely.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Is it something we will be like picking up with the other committees in a joint discussion, probably? I mean,
So
I feel
I
like we
definitely
should.
Yeah. This is going to be probably interactions between the technical steering committee once that starts maturing a little bit more next year, and these working groups that are coming up as well. Because I imagine there's going to be some projects tied specifically to certain working groups, depending on whatever their scope is, and intercorrelating. To me, I feel like it's something. A reason why is it's something that Intersect can offer to help build its community base. And that's kind of a primary driver for why I'm behind it. Because instead of just being a place that hosts projects, this is actually a place that can help give back to hosting projects rather than just a general open source program office.
Yeah. I mean, we'll kind of follow a bit as we have more and more points in this kind of design space of maturity, right? So if we have projects being part of the MBO, right, we see, oh yeah, this is more mature, and we'll kind of work out how we do the business there and how we do the alignment and what kind of, as you say, services are tied to this kind of project, which is more mature. And then we have another candidate, which is much less mature, right? And we can find this other point in this design space, and then suddenly we need to kind of draw the line, maybe in the maturing curve or whatever, right? As we go along, maybe.
Yeah. I'm gonna start off though by just doing the researching thing, because I think interacting with everyone, I'll see who's around over the holidays, but when we reconvene in January, then I'll start interacting with other collaborators towards this. But at least I'll have a basis of existing functions and try to develop our purpose going into it, and then we can focus on to continue it or drop the initiative at that point. But
I mean, it's probably like a kind of as we often do. I'm not sure as we have are we doing this right now in other committees also, right? But we're not reinventing the wheel here, right? We're kind of can look what others do and just say, oh yeah, that sounds good. Let's just pick this, right? And then we will stumble over one or the other, which doesn't apply to us or so, and we can just take that out, take that in, and so on.
That's a key thing to open source. Just copy what's applicable and improve it.
Check the license first.
Yeah, sure. I'll open it up to any other feedback from anyone on that initiative before we move to the next item.
I have one. So the line between the incubation and say a real project being onboarded, the onboarding criteria in a way, there's also some important points related to that on the strategy part where I got feedback. I think there should be separation and clarity, most importantly, clarity on that. Because so there could be a community behind it, but the maturity level hasn't reached yet. The point that Sebastian mentioned, the clarity on that part is pretty essential.
I agree with you. Yeah. It might be even a point to start off by thinking of the onboarding. So I'll research into, or I'll take that as an action item. I'll look into researching existing stuff and then drafting onboarding criteria or acceptance criteria to help elaborate that. But I think in some of the feedback too, we had one question: how would Intersect go find projects? And someone had commented, no, they will come find you if you're of interest. So I don't know if so much Intersect has to worry about finding people versus them finding us potentially as well. We just got to think about the criteria of hosting a project. But I think that's a good transition point into your feedback document, Cindy.
Sounds good.
If you're okay to if everyone's okay to change topics.
Yeah, I feel like we should be we'll come back to the policy draft, maybe as in the end, next steps and so on. But yeah, feel free, let's just do the other things first and then we come back to that.
Okay. We'll move on to just for clarity for everyone watching, Sandeep's leading this strategy technical working group, and he's done a poll to collect the community's feedback for an input into that strategy, which will be drafted sometime next year.
Yeah, based on the interviews and the feedback from the poll, I have listed out some of the points. And all of the points, they coincide and overlap, taking the community opinion. Here I have listed the main points here. For example, starting with community engagement and collaboration. On this, we get active community participation, communication channels, community leadership. these different topics. These have come time and again. In this strategy, we need to incorporate that either as a part of the broader Intersect strategy or to some extent on the open source part as well. And a lot of these points that should be included in the strategy, they are a little bit extensive. That goes beyond the open source project part. So this is a point of discussion for coming time. This document itself is open, so you can also provide feedback on this. The next one after the community engagement and collaboration is governance and decision making. Here we already have a policy for governance, at least a draft for the governance decision making from Michael. I would also like to point everybody to have a feedback on that. Next one was about the development and innovation. Here, the core that is under Intersect open source project, those are the legitimate source, and they are having a robust and secure code, having a quality code. The bugs are properly cared of. Those were the important things among the interviews that we conducted. And the culture of continuous improvement, adapting new technologies, how it can be used to make the system more efficient, more faster. Those are also the points of concern. Next one was improving developer and user experience. This is one of the pain points that we have found during the interviews. So getting started on Cardano development and sometimes also using the systems. So we have to work on this, and the priorities should also be to some extent on the projects that will help with improving developer and user experience as a part of the strategy.
I have a question here.
Yep.
Not sure if it's already relevant, but how we take in this feedback. I mean, most of this, the previous section just talked about, right? Sounds like a lot of it's on the projects themselves, right? On the content. Like what kind of features you follow. Is it more like making things robust, secure, or is it more like prioritize user experience higher than the other? Maybe this is more like the technical steering or kind of suggestions on the project itself. But maybe you can take some of these already in and just make it good practice to be very open to user feedback, right? Make sure you have these channels and so on in an open source project manner. That you really, users are maybe the first priority in a backlog or in whatever, how you organize your work, right? Maybe this is, we can take in this, some such as suggestions or so.
Yeah, I do agree. Yeah. So first thing, making sure that the project are safe, secure, at least the priority given to the security. Next one on top, the user experience, the developer experience, and there the community feedback should be incorporated in the roadmap. And this was one of the main points also provided by the community members during the interviews who we have done. I think that's very critical. The security cannot be compromised because it's a legitimate source. It has to work. It has to perform as it is. And the process for handling the security vulnerabilities, those are also discussed, but I haven't mentioned it here because there will, I think it's better to have a separate document for that. So considering the technology development and innovation part, these three things usually cover it: improvement, experience, and technology. And here, the feedback need to be considered. Next one about the sustainability, and this was pretty interesting because for some of the participants, say having project funded was very important. That's for good reason. And the other aspect, besides the funding as well, how we can ensure that the project is sustainable. There are people and talent to continue it further. So fostering talent development on the part of sustainability, that was important. So besides funding model as well. And it also includes how we choose the projects to be under Intersect, the onboarding part, defining clear criteria, also declaring the conflict of interest, if any. There could be a commercial project behind it as well, which is fine, but the declaration is important. And aligning with the goals. So open source values, does it align or not? I think that fits, that need to be addressed from the beginning as we move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, even quality
So-
metrics. I know on Discord I was talking with someone because DevX experience is also something that they were stressing was a
Mhm.
big thing that needs to be improved. And I'm trying to think of quality metrics by which you can base off that because it's a very subjective experience because each developer has a different experience kind of thing.
You were talking to me.
Oh, hey, Alex. Oh, perfect.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Well then.
These metrics
Perfect.
are both the success and the quality metrics, and on different aspects, not just from development, the CI/CD, the quality of that, whether tests are covering things that it need to cover, those metrics. And next one about the license compatibility. Two things. Sometimes it could be controversial. So business-friendly and open source compatible licenses. And even in the first point here about the governance and decision-making, the ownership and the support balance. Ensure that the creators retain ownership of project with supportive roles played by Intersect. So the ownership on the creator and Intersect playing a supportive role. That was one of the reiterated points, at least from the interviews.
It's a very interesting point, right? How are projects basically then organized, right? So what does ownership mean here, right? I mean, I think we had noted that there is some administrators on the projects, and these should be, I guess, the original authors or creators, as it said here. But in a way, it's still part of this MBO organization, right? So what is ownership really?
Yeah.
Because
and that
often in the CNCF models, right, it doesn't really mean that the CNCF owns these repos or so, right? Rather, they are really more like brought in to kind of guide and basically index and oversee, but not really, these things still stand by itself a bit.
Yeah. Well, and I think that comes down to the IP as well. So specifically in Intersect's case, the core Cardano's repos, the IP will be hosted under Intersect, but Intersect's owned by the members, so it decentralizes it that way. But I think for projects we take under our wing, we can keep those IP rights with them, and Intersect just hosts the code for their benefit in that regard, and they still maintain the direction of it, or have some kind of agreement that way. That way the owner still, all that creative content and design is theirs.
The other aspect to it is also decision making and say prioritization of the roadmap for the features, but it also link with the ownership in a way that what would get prioritized, how would feedback get processed. Some part of it is also about issues. So how those
Yeah,
can
I,
be
I, ha- I have
handled
a
or
question.
escalated.
I have a question about this thing and migrating repos. Sorry, guys. Thiago Nunes from the MCC committee here, just trying to
Hello.
get up to speed of what's going on. um, Basically, let's think about Dolos. That it's a process that is evolving and potentially can become like a core infrastructure project. It will go under the same rule as the Cardano initial um, node repositories, or will be on that other one. So what differentiates in terms of criteria?
I'm not sure what what the latest talks were with Dolos, originally authored by TXPipe, right? Whereas Cardano Node, originally authored by IOG. We know for sure that the Cardano repos are really bound to be like transferred at least into this organization, right? And we're kind of now, I guess, really figuring out, okay, how is this governance on Cardano Node done? How we can retain and kind of follow these some principles, but not still follow provide good practices and enable still the current, let's say, maintainers, right? And I think the same would go for Dolos. I'm not sure if TXPipe. I think they're a member, right? I wouldn't know.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. So now it's a very interesting question, right? If you would consider Dolos being an alternative implementation for Cardano Node, it's not there yet, right? It might be moving there, though, right? How would that work, right? So now we have two projects, kind of overlapping scope, maybe to some point, right? But it's going to be very interesting, right? How this is going to be managed. Yeah. I don't have a clear answer, but I think the policies we are kind of trying to find with everyone here is such that it can work one way or the other, right? So it's more like it's more also, I think, that we want to have just provide guidelines or what is good practice, that you should have this and you should have this, but if you're still free to kind of organize yourself in one way or the other, as long as you make sure, and I think these are the points Sandeep brings up here, right? As long as you make it sure it can be used by the community, it still stays open source. It has still this openness. You can approach it as somebody new contributing to it, right? But yeah, it's an interesting situation what happens to these projects between these, right? So if they kind of cover the same thing, and the quality criteria, and what was it? Just before there was this conflict of interest mentioned, right? At some point, right? So that's to some level unclear, I guess. Yeah.
There's still a lot of points to elaborate and to provide guidelines. One point about
I like to take
Dolos.
We should. So yeah, I think we should keep this example in our mind, right? So it's a good example. It's challenging in a way because maybe we shouldn't put a finger on something specific, but let's just say this example of the Cardano node ABC implementation of it, right? What speaks against
Question:
having a second?
How do you spell Dolos? I'm taking notes.
DOLOS.
Okay. Cool. I'm making sure that's an item to put in the notes before we publish.
Yeah, so I think it should be currently this project. If this is what you mean, Tiago, I hope I found the right.
No, it is, guys. That's the question of how we can be inclusive with node diversity, and keeping the intersects supposed work around those repositories. Also, if there is budget going to support that other repos, what criteria they should follow, and how to move forward in a direction where we can be inclusive with.
Yeah. I think the key word to cover that's strategic partnerships, right? And figure out what that means and guidelines around it.
Yeah. So the sustainable funding model for the projects, this need to be addressed in sufficient detail. And how? The answer is not clear yet, at least from what I see.
Yeah, I think it's something that's going to fall under the TSC's remit. We may have a piece in that if we're told we're involved in funding, but I don't think we are directly.
Yeah, but it is kind of relating all committees, right? So the MMC was membership something, right? But it's really these things and these potential points of conflict, right? I mean, what does it make if we have funding for one Cardano node, right? Why not have a part of it also for a second Cardano node, right? How much goes there? How much goes there, right? What is But one is much more mature, of course, right? It needs more funds, but the other one is less mature, right? But there still should be like openness to kind of consider this at least, right? That, oh no, we have already one node, we don't need a second one. This doesn't follow a kind of an openness principle, right?
Well, it comes to the committees. I guess we could build like a recommendation list of projects for funding, right? And feed that up to a decision body or whoever's in charge of that. Or it goes to SIP 6094 gives the community the vote power too, if a project needs, and we could be an expert panel towards that.
Certainly something like this needs to happen, right? I mean, what we can say is what is the quality gates? I mean, a node implementation must be open source, have compatible licenses, have good processes such that it's considered to be funded. But we can only say, okay, these are the what it should have, right? To have at this maturity level qualified funding maybe at one point. We don't decide the funding, but we can maybe give what is the requirement.
Expert opinion.
Yeah.
Or yeah. I'll make a note of that.
I think, for example, the Intersect members could do. You guys could like select, and then the committee, the Intersect members could do a prioritization, you know, and if we have a budget, that prioritization fits, you know, in that specific budget. So kind of we don't need to push a like on-chain governance vote, but then we just use an on-chain governance vote for like a broader budget scope containing several, you know.
I like that idea.
But from the strategy point of view, would that go to a different committee, or do we cover that here? What do you think, Christian or Sebastian?
I would say the input you give here is relevant for all committees, right? It is basically a nice survey. I haven't really, I don't have the context who was asked and how many and so on, but it is, like as we see right now, right, it is such a valuable trigger for discussions, and I think it needs to go to everyone involved, right? Of course, right, we need to figure out, okay, is it in our responsibility to decide this or this? Maybe not, right? But some of course,
yeah. And connected to this, we still have the poll out on the Discord channel, and I shared it on LinkedIn as well, my LinkedIn. But we're keeping that open till the end of the year to help further elaborate this. But this is kind of a general pulse check, and I wanted that to help feed the direction for the strategy altogether. Sandeep did pretty good with the questions.
So maybe you could just wrap this up. Let's get through it completely, and then, yeah, please continue, Sandeep. Yeah. Very good stuff.
Great. Other things were about challenges and opportunities in open source. So incentivizing people and developers to contribute to open source, how they can do that. We also had somebody representing that demographic. And there, the topics about technical complexities, how that can be simplified. Maybe there's incentive to simplify that. Dolos could be an example for Cardano node. So incentives towards that could be an approach. They're capitalizing on open source opportunities, so which builds utilities that serves the broader community needs. And again, this needs to be community-driven innovation, and it needs to fit with the strategy goals, and it should address the existing pain points like the developer experience, the quality, the security aspects, those things. And additionally, strategy consideration was feedback and continuous learning. This is, I think, common across every polls that we have. Is regularly incorporating the feedback from the community, either via polls, interviews, discussions, GitHub issues, and so on. Next one, promoting awareness and inclusivity. So not just, say, a one-side view, everybody's view and diversity, diverse opinions need to be considered from all aspects. This was the last point that we had. I think these are all important points, at least to have a discussion. And what we put on the open source strategy could be subset or a little bit extended on the certain points, and other points could be say taken to different committees' strategy. These are for the say starting the discussion on these points.
Yeah, as I already said, very good points. I can see already some things. I just did today the review of I guess the governance policy Michael drafted, right? And we're still missing some pieces, right? I mean, it's only a starting point, but many of these points here, for example, what level of licensing is required, right? That is a thing which is currently not covered, but I think is very important. So I took some notes.
Great.
Yeah, I was even thinking I don't know exactly how we want to engage licensing. I know what we currently have is pretty user-friendly altogether and for businesses to build off of. I just didn't know if there's certain standards we want to set or parameters around that.
Yeah, if I would be writing that section just right now, I would say, yeah, it must be a permissive license. For example, Apache to MIT or so, BSD. I think that is a good standard starting point, and maybe somebody has a different opinion, then we should consider that. But ideally, we should ratify that in a way that it can be used in commercial settings, right? Although there could be more radical license settings, right, as well, right?
Yeah.
We're quite liberal already, permissive, it's the name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is it from my side.
The big one that I'm a big part of too, which is what gives value to Intersect to these projects, is the promoting awareness piece too for strategic considerations. Because when you look at these other members-based organizations, they're just big fanfare essentially to help bring all people and collaborators together to engage on the projects and just build that sustaining community. So I can definitely help flesh out different offerings in that regard.
Great.
Thank you for that, Sandeep. Last item, or I guess new business, is on the Discord. We got the polls live. Let me bring that up real fast. So, for everyone here, the open source feedback channel here under Intersect, we do have the polls listed live. We have it right up here is the Project Incubation discussion. I know I had it somewhere up here.
It would be nice if you pin it.
Yeah, I was trying to find the poll.
If you pin that, then that'll be. Can you pin this? Hold on.
Yeah, can you help me out here?
Yeah.
I use Discord for more of reading and Slack messaging versus.
No worries. Yeah.
I can give you the links and we can pin them.
Yeah, just give me the links so I can pin that for you.
Yep.
Yes, this should be it. Huh?
Yeah. But that's the channel you'll find it in.
This was the public call, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, that's the closing action. We have committee actions are to review policies, add comments, try to engage community to help collaborate, just make people aware. Any other items to bring up, mention?
Yeah, we didn't really look into this current PR of Michael's, but basically I did a first review today. We're starting this. I really like by putting it down into a public GitHub repository, right? Makes it really real for me. And it kind of spawns discussion from my end much more than I think a Google Doc somewhere. So that's maybe just me. But yeah, I'll plan on discussing things out there with Michael. There was more of the, maybe a meta question is, what status does this thing have or will have, right? So we have, let me quickly share my screen if I just want to, okay, how can I do this here? Stop video, share, no. Damn it, I haven't been using Zoom in a very long while. Maybe I can't because I'm on a, oh no, here, it's green even. So yeah, we have basically set up this repository, right, which is very empty right now, right? I think the intention is that we, at least from the open source committee, will put information there, or some kind of policies, or the open source governance policies, what we're kind of drafting here right now in this first PR. And I think everyone is invited to review here until it gets too crowded. So, but yeah, you can just see the rich diff. So putting together a document here can be read here in GitHub, and starting to review this and having comments forth and back with Michael, who is who did the first initial round of this, and we put this here.
Yeah.
Maybe what we could take, if you have some time, right? So this is now a document, right? It's kind of written here, and as it's probably not great to be like, we can talk about it and discuss and incorporate changes, but maybe we should have more and more multiple like suggestions to change it, right? And we should not wait too long for it to just put it there, merged and in some status. The question is, what status does this have right away, right? Is it more like a draft? Is it in process? We should maybe make a status clear in the top or so, and what people's thoughts are about this document, maybe.
I would put it as I like the word initial draft because it's just our first round of thoughts. But
so you kind of rather lean as super early, right? Whereas Michael said, yeah, basically it's already in trial, right? We try to kind of do these things maybe by having the first projects in. I think repos will move this weekend, right? And maybe we're kind of testing these things out now already with early projects already, maybe, right? But yeah,
we could set up a pilot run on that. I know me and Michael are also talking. We should have a GitHub or Gitbook here set up soon, where we'll actually start publishing the committee charter, our meeting notes and things too. Because I think we're going to move away from the community tab and move into that. I just got to get this synced up early next year, and then we'll have a more official site that's easier to navigate.
Okay. I'm not sure about the logistics. I thought, I mean, it's going to be a different Git repo, or it's just a Git book kind of synced from something, or
Gitbook sync to it. I have to figure out the logistics myself. It's just, here's the idea.
Yeah, I mean, anything which makes editing as inclusive as possible, right? So the GitHub UI is not bad, right? But Gitbook, if I recall correctly, is more like a content management system based on Git, right? Where you can kind of create document pages with like, it's like Confluence, but based with Git, right, in the background. So could work for us. Yeah.
Yep.
Regarding the status, maybe proposed, like we had a discussion in Slack. I think that also works.
Yeah, it's still missing some pieces in my opinion, right? So there's maybe some kind of structuring and like sequence, how to kind of make it a nice but still concise and complete document. But I think it's it's a work in progress, definitely, right?
Yeah.
One other point, last time I checked, the committer's definition. I mean, contributor and committer, that could be a little bit blurry in a way. I mean, you could also contribute to documentation and other things that doesn't need to be the actual code. in the governance, the committee is composed of committers. At least the committer word is specific as that. I was a little bit concerned about that.
Yeah, there's maybe something still unsharp. I think the general idea is that, yes, there is contribution without contributing code, right? And committer is typically somebody with write access to something, whereas you could still help in, I guess, dealing with the things around it, right? But if you keep everything in a repository, you're eventually going to be a committer in one way or the other. So maybe, I see that unclarity.
Well, I feel like it's a confusion of those inner source words too, right? Trusted committer, and just kind of someone who's built rapport as a contributor to earn the right, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
what was our last there's this engineering handbook also, right? We have this document now, and we have maybe some other stuff we had in the past. The Cardano engineering handbook, right? Did we kind of come to a conclusion how we want to incorporate this, and say rather, yeah, the policy is this, these are the goals, these are our values, and the engineering handbook is something which kind of you can do to follow these values, but you're free to also do otherwise if you still follow the principles also, right?
Well, if we're going to adopt it, what kind of process do we go through? Do we go page by page and say yay or nay, or do we just accept it as here's a guidelines, and that way it kind of saves a detail?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense much to have the Cardano engineering handbook, it's the name of it, in IOG, right? If either we don't have it at all, or we have it for like ready and amendable by everyone, right? So kind of make it a bit more of a community good rather than something we started there, right? And it stays there.
Yeah. Okay.
And
I'll bring that up.
there was a lot of work. Yeah, there was a lot of work already put there in. I mean, again, Michael was also instrumental in writing this, right? So he's been very busy. There is more practical stuff in there, maybe things which doesn't really apply at all if you look at Intersect and how things work at Intersect, right? Maybe it's more like a handbook for the Cardano project, the current stack, which is kind of moved there, right? But doesn't apply well for Dolos, right? And maybe we need to kind of take out some things and put it rather into the project and have it a bit more have more.
Well, it could also
maybe can separate.
We could pull certain sections for policy too, because like one of the things that's in there that I like as a standard is listing your code of maintainers within the repository, so that way everyone knows who they're talking to, essentially.
Yeah, and as you said, inner source before, right? Inner source has also quite a guideline on how to deal with contribution guidelines. What should be in it, right? What is like the pieces you should have on the repository? How do you deal with licensing, right? How do you explain how do you do employer security guideline and so on?
Well, we do have there are two ways of hosting it too. We could make it a committee initiative and enforce it that way, or we could use it as here's some OSPO standards that specific Intersect projects use, and it's safe under that umbrella too. It's just which window you want to go.
I mean, I think a good default is what I would feel is good. So if I think of me in the Cardano ecosystem, like if I need to follow this or this, I don't like to have like imposed rules on me, right? But if I don't have something yet, I would rather want to see, oh yeah, this is how I could do it. Okay, cool, I'll adopt it. So I don't have strong opinions and do it. If I don't have it right now in my project right away, maybe I can just adopt this practice from that guideline, handbook, whatever you call it, right? If I don't want to take that, right, I could still like maybe argue, yeah, I'm doing it this way, right? It's following the same principle, and it's still fine to be qualified as an incubating project on Intersect still, right? So it's fine to keep it that way also, right? And maybe the maturing stages are good checkpoints to say, yeah, do you actually considered all of this, right? And that way, basically, the policy is very small, but it kind of points to, hey, these are some known to be compliant practices, right? And these are, you could just use these, right? Or deviate in one of them if you prefer differently, as long as it kind of follows these principles.
Yeah, well, and I'm kind of the heavy mindset. You at least need some minor basic enforcement, which is like you must have a README and you must have a contributing ND at like the minimum.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot.
I mean, we can draw a line, right?
That.
Yeah, we can draw a line, right? But of course, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the initial guidelines, the initial requirement, also part of the onboarding, and for the handbook and best practices, I think if the project can explain the reasoning for choosing something else based on the principles, it is also mentioned on the policy document, then I think it is good.
Yeah. And interestingly, our open source policy on whatever, right, should be as, like, if you don't, I mean, if you say something, okay, this is maybe the guideline, right? So having a written, if you don't like it, right, explain why and do a PR on the policy, right? Convince us otherwise.
Yeah.
And maybe there is a way which is not exactly that way, which is good, and we can basically make it more of a should or make it more of a guideline because there is this other way at least. But until there is none, right, then maybe it's fine. But
well, and we can help by providing here's a really good template, or even doing one for that's easy. Just drop your name and replace it with the nouns or something.
But what we certainly don't want is to have create artificial friction for just having it this way or that way with projects, right? We shouldn't be like the pesky reviewer, right? Saying the nitpicking guy. It's rather, hey, if you're like doing it, if you're trying to do it right, then all is good.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I actually like that idea too, because that gives reason behind saying no, and they can be reviewed too.
Okay. Christian, I just want to touch on one of the facts that you just mentioned about the community-driven activities. I think that's something that's always been, should I say, been highlighted by a lot of community members on one-on-one meetings too. Regional, events or regional meetings. I think that's definitely in the books next year. We'll be looking at people having their own sort of, for example, town halls in different regions. So what you just mentioned about community-led sort of, meetings or anything of that sort, that's absolutely, I would say that's really in there. Yeah, you're planning to do that. So yeah, definitely. So, yeah.
Cool. Sounds like a wrap for today, unless there's anything else. I'm making sure I'm taking notes.
Let me.
I have a question. Why did we go with it? Why did we go with Zoom, by the way? Is there a specific reason, or for this public instance right now?
If you were part of our second town hall, it was a terrible Discord experience. So we went away from that.
Yeah, this is actually the community saying use Zoom. So if go to the community. This is it. This is the best part. Now you guys can't go, well, why did you guys use it? Well, the community.
Yeah.
So boom, there you go.
But
point me to the vote. I'm silent.
That's what using Zoom. So yeah.
Which we do have. If anyone wants to change it, there's a communication poll out right now on preferences. So
exactly.
But the whole community has to vote. So there you go.
Our first governance action.
Oh yeah, Zoom or Google Meet. It's like what? Yeah. No worries. Let me. Is anything else? Then I can stop the recording for.
I think we're good.
Okay.